Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wheeler Winstead. I am the Assistant Director for the Center for African Studies, and this is the last of the information sessions that we are having for the FLAS Fellowship applications for the summer 2023 and the academic year 23-24. I'm going to start by just sharing my screen just so you can see the things we're going to be talking about. We may be joined by Dr. Muwaka or the Yoruba instructor who will give you more information on some of their specific programs. If not, I'll simply give you the basics on their programs. However, to really understand what in fact these programs are about, you're going to need to contact them. Okay, so let me start by sharing my screen here. Okay, I believe you all can see this. So this is the information session, as I mentioned. If you could all please mute your mic, turn off your video, that will actually make it easier for us to move forward. Please place your questions in the chat, and there will be a time at the end of the session for you to ask your questions. So today we're going to give you a basic introduction to the Center for African Studies. You will get information on the FLASC, or Foreign Language and Area Studies Fellowship. We're going to talk about the types of FLASC, the requirements, the application process. We're also going to give you a little bit more information about other funding and the African language programs that are being offered. So let's go ahead and get started. The FLASC, let me make sure this is the right, no, yeah. All right, so the Center for African Studies, we are a Title VI program funded by the Department of Education, and we support African-related teaching and research. We provide foreign language area studies fellowships for academic year and summers in terms of tuition and stipend support. So for those of you who want to know more about this, you can go to our page, our webpage, and I'll actually show you that webpage in a minute. And this is where you get more detailed information. This information session is also being recorded. It will be available on the website for those of you who want to look at it at another time. So we are talking about FLASC fellowships that are available for the summer 23 and academic year 23-24. These are fellowships whose deadline, both of the deadlines are due February 28th, 2023. February 28th, 2023, 5 o'clock. So please make note of that. So you have now about 13 days, a little less than 2 weeks to get your application in. Please also note, you need to get your information to your those who are going to provide reference to you ahead of time, so that you don't come to them the day before your application is due and say, oh, I need you to do a reference for me. And they'll ask you, well, when does it due? And you say tomorrow. You can be put in a situation where they just don't do it. So keep in mind, everything is due February the 28th. How many languages are offered? Right now, we offer 7 African languages. We are planning on offering 3 in the fall now. So those of you who are interested in it, I'm not sure if it's actually available. I know that it should be available in the fall. There will be, right now, you can register for 7 African languages. These are the only African languages which you will be able to apply for a FLAS fellowship for. So FLAS is a funding source only. Basically, we provide money so that you can choose a program either at Howard or another institution to study. All we are is a funding source. However, the program that you choose, if it's outside of Howard, would have to be approved by the Department of Education. We do give priority to Howard programs. We give priority to Howard students, and there is funding for both the graduate students and undergraduate students. And for the academic year fellowship, you must register for both an African language and an African area studies course. Keep in mind, I said an African language and an African area studies course. I am not referring to an African studies course, an African area studies course. There are other courses that are offered that qualify for African areas that are not actually offered in the program of African studies. And actually, let me see if I can actually find one of those for you, to find the listing, so that when you go online, you say, okay, well, I don't know, what are some of the other African area studies courses? This is the information you will have. So hold on, let me see if I can find it. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing here, and I'm going to share this other screen so you can see what do I mean by African area studies courses. Okay, this is where you go to find a list of some of the African area studies courses. There are over 180 African area studies courses, African related courses. Basically, it's any course that has 25% African content. So don't think you have to register for an African studies course, an African area studies course. So if you click on undergraduate, just about every school, every department will have African related courses. Of course, African studies, Afro-American studies, economics, fine arts, Department of History, course world languages, political science, psychology, business, and also that's undergraduate. So for graduate, you have similar African related African area studies courses. So that's what we mean by an African related or African area studies course. Does not mean an African studies program, course in African studies. Is everyone clear on that? Any questions on what I mean by an African area studies course? Because I've had people say, well, there's no room in the African studies program. We're not talking about African studies course program. We're talking about African area studies. Any questions about that issue? You're all clear. Okay. So let's continue on. Let me go back to my presentation. So let's see, here we go. Okay, so you must take both an African language and an African area studies course. There are at least 2 exceptions that I'll talk about later, and those exceptions are for graduate students, not for undergraduates. So the award for the summer fellowship, both the graduate and undergraduate student gets $5,000 towards your program fees or tuition and $2,500 for living expenses. That's for the summer. For the academic year, the graduate or a graduate student will get $20,000 stipend and an $18,000 tuition award, and an undergraduate gets a $5,000 stipend and a $10,000 tuition award. The stipend you use to do whatever you want to do with it, to live, to do whatever you want to do. Your tuition award can only be used toward your fees and programs. It cannot be used for anything else, cannot be used for books. And you cannot double dip. In other words, if you have a full, if your tuition is paid in full and you are qualified for a FLAS, you can still get a FLAS. However, you will not get a tuition award. However, you can get the stipend. And for the graduate student, for the academic year, that's $20,000. For the undergraduate student, for the academic year, that's $5,000. For the summer, it's the same for graduate and undergraduate students. You both get $5,000 for the program fees and $2,500 living expenses. Those fees may not cover all of the costs. Okay, you need to understand that. And in most cases, they will not. But they do. So that here's a question: how many people are being awarded? Actually, I should have had that number for you, Jordan. But I tell you what, you send me that in an email, and I'll let you know how many fellowships are available. I'll tell you this: for the most part, we have been able to give out more fellowships in the recent years than in the past. So, I mean, I recommend that if you're interested, apply. Okay, let's keep on going. So what are the general eligibility requirements? In both for the summer and for the academic year, you must be a registered Howard student. Now, does that mean students from other universities cannot apply for FLAS? No, it doesn't mean that. Specifically, it doesn't mean that for the summer. However, for the academic year, you will have to be a registered Howard student, and you'll have to be a full-time student. For the summer, you do not have to be a full-time Howard student. You have to be a full-time student somewhere, but it doesn't have to be at Howard for the summer. You will have to register at Howard, but you don't have to be a Howard student for the summer. You got to have a clear promise of completing your academic program. We look at your graduate transcripts, and you've got to have a plan that basically says you will use the language. For example, if you are simply interested in learning the language because you think speaking Swahili is cool, that's nice. You won't qualify for a FLAS. You've got to say somehow you plan to use the language in your career or in your studies. You have a question? So what if you don't have all of the requirements at your host institution? I'm not sure, Oja, what you mean by that. You want to clarify that? You can turn on your mic and clarify your question.
Hi. So basically what I'm asking is, what if you don't have African area studies at the host institution that you currently attend and you want to apply for the summer?
Okay, so for the most part, students, if you're not, you got to be registered at Howard full-time for academic year fellowship. So you cannot be at a different school and be taking and get a FLAS. Now, let me just think about this for a second. So preference is going to be given to Howard students. You're going to have to be registered at Howard. So if you could register at Howard to take an African Area Studies course and an African language and be registered another student, maybe that could work. But you will have to be registered at Howard, and you will have to take the African language and an area studies course at Howard. There might be some configuration that something else might work. I recommend that you talk, we discuss this offline. Okay, let's look at some more general eligibility requirements. You got to have an excellent record show as evidenced by your GPA. So that doesn't mean you have to be a 4.0. It doesn't mean you have to be a 3.5. It does mean that if we have a choice between a student with a higher GPA showing strong that they're going to use the language, that other student will get preference. So this is something we look at. And by the way, these eligibility requirements are not set by Howard. These are eligibility requirements set by the Department of Education. We've got to verify that all of the students who are chosen meet these requirements. You've got to demonstrate a financial need. So if you already have funding for tuition from other sources, then and you have a stipend from other sources, you will not rank high in terms of getting a FLAS. However, you can receive tuition from other source and receive a FLAS if you're not getting a full tuition. But it is important that we give priority to those who have need. And you have to be willing to comply with the Department of Education requirements in terms of reporting and in terms of reporting after the FLAS and reporting during the FLAS. So the Department of Education wants to follow up with students and wants to have the right to follow up with you up to 8 years after your FLAS. Therefore, you must supply both a Howard or university email address and a non-university email address. Also, during the time you are a FLAS recipient, you will be required to complete both a pre and post FLAS report, where you will provide the classes that you're taking. You got to show that you're taking one language and one area studies course at least, and you got to take it for a grade. We have another question. Let's see. This is from Jordan. I'm a journalist, film major, plan on using Arabic. Yeah, that would qualify. That would be a strong reason for you to qualify for a FLAS. Another question, legitimate GPA. Yeah, if you have an explanation as to why your GPA is low, it doesn't mean we're going to disqualify you. It does mean that that question is asked, and you're going to have to explain why we should choose someone that has a higher GPA over you, because they're asking that the person have an excellent academic record as evidenced by the GPA letters of recommendations. I have another question. For the summer FLAS, can I take advanced or graduate level of Yoruba at a university abroad? Yes, you can. Yes, you can. You do not have to take it at Howard. This happens a lot, as a matter of fact. You may want to take it in Nigeria, in this case, Tajuddin. So you do not have to take it at Howard. You can take it at a university abroad. However, you do need to get approval of that university. Now, there are several universities, particularly in Nigeria, that already are approved. So that is the case. Let's go on. Fellowships are awarded for advanced level only, for at least for undergraduates. Undergraduates will never receive award for beginning level, period, no exceptions. Again, these are regulations set up by the Department of Education, and we have been chastised when we have allowed students to take a course, and this is their first semester. I believe that is correct, Tajuddin. University of Ibadan. Okay, so let me keep on going here. All right, so now some more specifics on the academic year. So you can use your academic fellowship in the United States. You can also use it abroad, assuming you meet all of the criteria. So there are the regular awards. These are students that take at least one academic, one language and one area courses. Now for the graduates, there are at least two situations where in fact they will not have to take an African language. If in fact they're doing research abroad and they're going to be actually using the language, or they're in dissertation writing. But in both cases, they must have finished all of the degree work. In these cases, they will not, you will not. If this is your situation, you will not have to take an African language. And that is only for graduate doctoral students. Okay, so let's keep on going. For the summer. The summer awards are for intensive language studies, okay? For the summer area studies, coursework is not required. It is only intensive language studies, okay? You can use it both, as I mentioned, in the US and abroad. Now, here's a situation where graduate students may enroll in the beginning level only if an equivalent instruction is not available in the US. And they have to use their language for their degree work. Okay, so a graduate student may enroll in the beginning level only if an equivalent instruction is not available, excuse me, in the US. Any questions so far? So the summer is intended to provide intensive language study, which means at the advanced level, you have to have at least 120 contact hours of instruction, at least 120. At the intermediate level, you have to have at least 140 hours of contact hours. Field trips and excursions do not count toward contact hours. Normally, however, in the HUSA program at Howard, they do use field trips, but it is not simply, oh, let's go look at the animals. And these programs, you are using the language in your field trip, so it's not really just a field trip. See, we have another question. Can I receive FLAS of any type and other external awards? Yeah, you can. You can receive FLAS, however, you cannot double dip. What do I mean? If your tuition is being covered by particularly a federal grant, then you cannot get a tuition award. However, if only your tuition is being covered, then you can get a FLAS, but you will only get a stipend. And we do look at, and you do have to provide information about what other awards you're given. Again, the idea is that financial need is a criteria. So if someone is as qualified as you, they're getting no awards, no other fellowships, then they may actually be ranked higher than you. Okay, so let me continue on. So again, these are the graduate student exceptions. We already talked about this. And more on the graduate student level requirements. Graduate students may engage in beginning level only if, and this is in for the academic year, they have advanced proficiency in another language related to the field of study, and learning the new language is required for the students' overall training. And in terms of particularly the summer program, they may enroll at a beginning level summer program only if equivalent instruction is not available in the US. And these exceptions are approved on a case-by-case basis. So they have to have a proficiency in another language related to their field of study. and it's required as a part of their training and expertise. So these are the only two exceptions for graduate students. Independent studies. I want to make sure you please understand this. You can take an independent study for your language and your area studies courses. However, that has to be approved. If you put down that you're taking, you're in Yoruba and you're in independent studies, you will have, the professor would have to submit a syllabus. The syllabus has to describe all of these things. What's the objective, requirements, the standards for evaluating the student, schedule, assignments, and bibliography, and the instructor's curriculum vitae. This information is sent to the Department of Education, and they approve or disapprove whether this study qualifies. And they at times and have disapproved pending more information. So you can take independent study, directed reading, directed research for either your language or your area studies. However, you will have to provide this information in order to get it approved. Okay, distance learning can be used for FLAS. So it doesn't mean that in any of the courses you have to, it has to be in face-to-face, but it does have to be synchronous if it's long distance learning. Okay. And I think that that's the requirement in just about all of our courses. I don't think, at least Howard has asynchronous classes where you basically learn on your own. So if you are using online classes as your FLAS requirement, it has to be synchronous. And if you are using distance learning, then that course has to be synchronous. And if it's not synchronous, or if there is some issue, it will have to be approved by the Department of Education. The student may use a FLASK for programs overseas, as long as they complete the program requirements. So this is both for academic year and summer. You may use your FLAS for programs overseas. All right, we're going to talk specifically about the summer. Students, choose your own program for the summer. Howard has a number of programs. We give preference for students who are choosing Howard programs. So Howard has the Summer Institute. These are courses, language courses that are offered at Howard. And so you could choose one of those. Then it has the HUSA, or Howard University Swahili Study Abroad program. I'll give you a little bit more on that. And Dr. Mwaka's here. He can explain more specifically. There is the Swahili GPA and the Yoruba GPA, and there are other programs. The GPA programs, however, you will not be able to use a FLAS with it because it basically pays for everything. But these are other programs. You choose the program. FLAS provides funding. You may choose a domestic or an overseas program. Overseas programs must be approved by the Department of Education. You must receive grade and credits for your language courses. You must receive grades and credits. We have another question. Miranda, I am hoping that will come out shortly, and I would recommend that you contact Dr. Mwaka, Dr. Leonard Mwaka, and he will provide that information. Otherwise, I could, if he comes on, I will also send him a text regarding information on the Howard summer programs. But again, if you don't have to wait, you can contact Dr. Leonard Mwaka. I believe his email address is leonard.mwaka@howard.edu. I believe it's actually in the slide later on. So that's where you'll get that information. So again, summer are intensive programs only. They have to be at least 6 weeks in duration. I talked about what the graduate students can enroll at the beginning, only if an equivalent is not offered in the US. It has to be 6 weeks, at least 140 for beginning and intermediate, and 120 for 120 for advanced. Research in African studies. That's a good question. We've been actually, well, what I ask is to see me later on about that. If it's simply an independent study, if you are working independently, it will be considered an independent study. Okay. So, but contact me later on that, because we are in discussion if in fact that course is considered independent study or directed reading. So don't just put it down and think you don't have to do, that's not an independent study. I recommend that you get back to me on this so that, so we can finalize it. So questions, are there opportunity for students who haven't taken an African language prior to summer or academic year? Yes and no. If you haven't taken at least one language course, one semester for the academic year, you will not qualify for a FLAS unless you're a graduate student and these other things apply. So if you're an undergraduate student and you haven't had at least one semester of an African language, you will not qualify. However, let's say you're interested in taking an academic, you want to go apply for a class for the academic year. You haven't taken a language yet, take the language in the summer. That would give you your semester. Actually, it'll give you a full year. Because taking the language in the summer gives you a full year of language study. Excuse me. So again, for those of you who have not taken an African language and want to apply for FLAS, you got to have at least one semester. If you're an undergraduate student, you can take it in the summer and then you will qualify for the academic year. You will not qualify for the summer. If you're a graduate student and any of these other issues apply to you, you can qualify. But by and large, you must have at least one semester of the language before you qualify as FLAS. Okay. Okay, we mentioned this, and this last one is sort of another thing you should look at. Students may combine supplementary program hours with private tutoring to meet the number of requirement contact hours. Now, this is usually not the case, but if one of your programs, say, only had 100 hours, then you can get a private tutor. That tutor would have to be qualified. We would have to get it approved. So you can combine. You can combine overseas. You can combine abroad, stay abroad. You can combine these to meet the requirement. Another question, Maya, does that include, as an incoming freshman, you cannot qualify unless taking it in the summer first? Yes, unless you have proficiency in the language and you, the language teacher can actually give you a language test and you can qualify and show that you have already beginning level proficiency, then you would qualify. You would qualify not for beginning, but you can take, say, your or second semester language. However, if you're an incoming freshman you haven't taken any languages courses, you do not plan to take one in the summer, you will not qualify. However, if you are a freshman and you want to apply for FLASC in the fall, you must take the language in the summer. That's correct. You must take it in the summer to qualify for the fall. Okay, so how are the payments dispersed? The institutional payment, the tuition and fees, these are limited to the actual cost. In other words, if you, let's say your semester, a semester here cost about $13,000. You have $11,000 already in other funds. You qualify for a FLASC, and you're saying, "Oh well, I have 11,000. I can only need 2,000. I can get a FLASC tuition, and so you're an undergraduate, $5,000, and I can get the rest for myself." No, so you will only get you can only cover the actual costs and tuition fees. You cannot be reimbursed or get money for the overage. Okay. And so that means that in some cases, tuition may be less where other funding or local funding is present. The stipend is paid directly to you. You use that wherever you want, with the exception of the summer. I know there are some restrictions with Dr. Mawaka's program where they're expecting that you use some of the stipend for program costs, but it's basically for the academic year, the stipend comes directly into your account. And again, every semester, you must demonstrate that you are taking a language, African language, and an area studies course. It is not automatic. If you drop out or in one semester, let's say you qualify for the FLAS for the fall, for the academic year, you're taking an African language and an area study in the fall, but in the spring you say, I don't want to take an African language, you don't qualify. Or in the spring you say, I don't have room for an area's African related studies, you don't qualify. So you must take the African language, African area studies in both semester. Or let's say you are a student and you are not in good standing. If somehow well, we've never had a student that was been on probation, but if you're on probation, it doesn't mean you can't. But if you drop out, then obviously you will not be eligible for a FLAS. In all cases, the student must receive your full stipend. So there is no case, if you qualify for a FLAS, you will receive your full stipend. There are some cautions now for travel. This was more the case when there was COVID, but there are some places that the State Department feels is dangerous, and they if that place has a level 4, do not travel, you will not be able to use your Fulbright. So there are places in Africa that are considered by the State Department as level 4. You will not be able to go there and use your FLAS. Or authorized, and it says last, IFL will not approve travel to countries under an authorized departure where the ambassador has requested Fulbright projects participants to leave for security reasons. So if there's a security problem in the country, you won't be able to go there. Again, we mentioned the academic year, what the awards are like. We've actually covered this. We've actually covered this. You can use more than one program. All right, so when you apply, you can go to 2 places to apply. You can go directly to our website. And let me show you. I'm going to actually pull up those sites, stop sharing this, so you can see where you would actually go to apply. 1 second, let's see here. Okay. I am not seeing it here. Hold on. Okay. Okay, let's see. Okay, I must have, well, I can get it back here. Okay. All right, let me share this one. Okay, this is the site. Okay, this is the site you would go to. If you go directly to the site, this is what the site looks like. And this is where you log in to apply. And once you log in, you can either apply for the summer, for the academic year, spring, summer, or for the follow-up. Now, the follow-up you wouldn't be eligible for that. And this is when you come here, this gives you information. Actually, let me get out of this. This is actually what my site, excuse me, 1 second. This is not what yours look like. Let me log out. Okay, and let me come back in, sorry. All right, this is what it looks like. So when you come back in, you register, or if you're already registered, you log in. Okay, hold on, I think I lost you. So for those of you who are, I hope everyone is still here. Sorry. Let me go back and see if I can find that. Okay. Okay, this is where you come when you log in. You can either log in because you've already registered, or you actually will register. And once you register, you can always come back in. But let me also now go to the site where if you go to our website at Howard, where you can also register for the FLAS. And let me just get that here. All right, so let me come here. So if you come to our page, this is on Flask, you come to our page, you come down, it gives you more information on the Flask. And this is where you actually, if you click on this application page, it actually will take you to the same site. It'll take you to the other site that I mentioned. So you can get to the site in two ways. You come directly to the Center for African Studies, FLAS, or you go directly to the Howard University Center for African Studies.org. Either way, that's how you get to apply. So I'm going to stop sharing that, and I'm going to come back to my info session here. So these are the two ways you get to the application. When you get to your application, there are several things you're going to see. You have to provide a statement of purpose, basically a 500-word statement. We do read these, okay? Don't just put anything there. You've got to show how the FLAS will contribute to your work in the future or your study. And if you are applying for both the summer And the academic year, you've got to have a statement of purpose. It could be the same one, but you've got to put a statement of purpose in each of those. You're going to need 2 references. So contact your reference beforehand. Let them know you're going to be applying for a FLAS, because the system will send them an email saying this person has applied for a FLAS. They put you down as a reference. Please provide the reference. Their reference is automatically uploaded into the website. Okay, you do not send their reference to us. You must give their email address. Make sure their email address is correct, because it will go to that email address, and you must include their title. If they're an instructor, professor, whatever, put something down. If for some reason you have to resign or withdraw, your award is prorated. However, there have been cases where people withdrew and had to resign, and they had to repay. Let's say they didn't have a good reason. They just quit, and they got the money. And then you will be required to repay the FLAS. Again, this is what I showed you. When you click on here, you have to register. You have to choose a username and password. Then when you come back, you can log in. When you log in, you have to choose a program you're going to apply for, okay? You need to apply for academic year or summer. Those are the 2 programs you can apply for. But you must select the appropriate program. Now, what if you don't qualify? So, see these 4 questions here. You must answer these 4 questions, yes. If you answer any one of these questions, no, you don't qualify. Now, let's say you are a student at another university. You need to say you are a full-time Howard undergraduate or graduate student. Answer that yes, okay? Because if you don't, it's going to kick you out. All right? You've got to be a full-time Howard undergraduate or graduate student. Even if you're in another school and you're going to come in a summer, you still have to be a full-time student, and you still have to register at Howard. So if you're in another school, answer that yes. Let's say you did it already and you made a mistake and you answered no and it says you didn't qualify. Send me an email, we can reverse that. Okay? But if you don't answer these 3 questions, yes, you won't qualify. You have to have taken at least 1 semester of African language. You have to be a US citizen, and you have to be willing to study, if this is an academic year, both in African language and African area studies course. If you answer that no, you will just be disqualified. So that's important that you answered yes. So we have Tam has a question. How about starting master's program in the fall? I'm not sure what your question is. Can you clarify that, please?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I'm starting a new program at Howard in the fall. However, I currently am not in school.
Okay.
So how would I answer that? It would be no, would it?
If you're going to be a full-time student in the fall, it would be yes.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So this is when you're taking the FLAS, are you going to be a full-time student? So even if you're not registered, but you're going to be, answer yes. Okay. So again, if you're deemed ineligible, the application will not be able to be submitted. You can get in touch with me, and that can be reversed if necessary. All right. It's not the end of the world. If you are deemed eligible, you have to complete all of these areas. Anything that has to have a star, has a star on it, you have to complete it. These are mandatory fields that have to be completed, and then you submit as final. But all of these areas will have to be completed. You can always go back and edit your application until the deadline. So it doesn't matter if you have until February the 28th, you can always go back and edit. And you can always withdraw. So that's the information on FLAS. Very quickly, let's see if Dr. Mwaka is in Here, I don't see Dr. Mawaka participating or any of the other language instructors. So I'm just going to give you my brief overview of what I understand these other programs are. First, let me say there are other sources of funding. If you're going to be studying abroad, there's the globalization fee. This is for, I believe this is for all students. I don't want to say that they're for undergraduates. I think both graduate and undergraduate students can apply for globalization and the Lucy Moten. So there are other funds that you can apply for that you can use with your FLAS. Let's say the FLAS does not cover all of your summer program money. You can go to these, go to this address, and you can apply for other programs, other scholarships. Globalization, the Lucy Moten. Okay, there are other resources. Okay, so I'm going to briefly go through these. These are programs. They are not FLAS related per se. FLAS can be used to fund the HUSA program and the Howard University African language programs. It cannot be used for the Swahili GPA, cannot be used for the Yoruba GPA, and potentially we may even have a Zulu study abroad. FLAS will be used for them. So I'm going to quickly go through these. Again, if you want to see that, if you want more information for these, the person you will contact, their name, email address is at the end of their presentation, this part of the presentation. Okay, the Howard University Swahili Study Abroad, or HUSA, Intensive Summer Language Program, operates in Tanzania and Kenya, open to current HU students and non-HU students. Okay, this is one program where if you're not a Howard student, you can take this. However, the only way you're going to get a FLAS is you've got to be a registered Howard student. You can be a Howard student and go this program, but you won't. If you don't register, you won't get a FLAS. However, this is open to all students. You can take it for credit or not for credit. Enhance its language immersion, hands-on exposure to East African arts and crafts, use Swahili with local people daily on a daily basis. There is both the cultural and education excursions. There is also tour and cultural excursion to Zanzibar, and you will take one tour to at least one national park. This program does qualify for a FLAS. It's a great program. But to get a FLAS, you have to be a registered student and you take it for credit. So the person to see about this, two people, Dr. Mawaka, leonard.mawaka@howard.edu. These are his telephone numbers are there. His email address is there too. If you're interested in HUSA, this is who you contact. Or Dr. Lisanza. The GPA, you cannot use the FLAS for the GPA. This is a national competition, and students all over the United States are applying for this. GPA basically covers everything. It is advanced language, so the Fulbright program, mandatory orientation, 8 weeks, homestay with the Swahili family, 5 to 6 hours of intense daily Swahili instruction, cultural tour, historical cultural sites on the weekend, have to be a U.S. citizen. This is for advanced students, so you have to have at least 4 or 5 semesters of Swahili language. It covers everything with the exception, I think, of $1,000. The same thing for the Yoruba GPA. Same thing. Everything but $1,000. All right, we're at the end. Any questions that have not been answered that you would like to have answered? And actually, at this point, you can just raise your hand. Anyone have any questions? That have not been answered? Okay, Ryan.
Hi. My question is, as far as, is there a listing to find out which schools abroad are approved?
No, there aren't. Basically, if the schools says they're offering study abroad, most of the study abroad schools have been approved, but you got to supply that information to us. We submit it to the Department of Education and they let us know. If they're not already approved, they can get approved. But they want to actually do the vetting, not us.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Destiny, yes.
Hi, Dr. Wheeler. My first question is, will the Howard African Languages be in person or virtual this summer?
That's a good question. I don't know. It's possible they could be virtual.
Okay, because I think
It is
that's
possible.
what the website says currently.
Yeah, I think it could be virtual. I
Okay.
mean, then I think that's a great deal. I mean, you do virtual, then you get $2,500.
My second question is regarding the recommendation letters. Is it required that one of the recommendation letters comes from the professor that taught the language class?
No,
And if
it's not,
so, okay,
not a
great.
requirement, but we're going to ask why you want to use that person as a recommender.
Right. Okay. So
So,
like if it's been a while, because I took my class abroad a couple years ago, so I don't necessarily have the contact information of that
not
instructor.
necessary. Not
Okay.
necessary.
Great.
Thank
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, yes.
Hello, it's Aja.
Aja, thank you for correcting me. Aja.
I wanted to ask if, because when you were going through the slides towards the end, when we got to the Yoruba GPA, it kind of cut out for a little bit. So I wanted to know if we could get a little bit more information on that, because I don't know if the recording is going to have it. And then I also wanted to ask, in my particular situation, I'm currently a student in Nevada, and we don't have any African language area. I mean, it might be some, I have to really dig, but we don't have any designated African American or African studies at my particular institution. So I've actually left public comment as my student body government about it, and I'm going to be preparing to speak to the Board of Regents for Nevada about this, because it makes it very challenging for me as a student to be able to be eligible for aid with getting this available to the Black students specifically here. I'm originally from Atlanta, so I'm very blown away by how challenging it's been, but I wanted to come to the information session today to get information on how I can move forward to best learn my studies.
Yeah, first, I put the person's email address in the box there for you to contact if you want to see them. And actually, I'm going to copy. So there is a copy of the presentation. So if you want it, download it. It's right there. But a copy of this is also going to be online in the FLAS website. However, if you want it, just download it. It's there for you. And Aja, I encourage you to advocate for African languages. Advocate for African languages. So, here at Howard, we're about Africa. So we're adding more African languages, as a matter of fact. Any other questions? Okay, you have until the 28th. Don't wait until the 27th. And then all of a sudden, 20 people are online, and all of a sudden you have a bad internet connection, you lose something. So I don't recommend you do that, because I'm not saying there's no situation we won't consider, but don't put yourself in that situation. All right, thank you all for coming to the information session. Let me put my email address in here if you need to reach me. But it's usually all over the place, so it's not hard to find. If you need to reach me, that's where you need to reach. You can reach me there. All right, everyone. I wish you well. Look forward to getting your applications.